Okay, I want you to picture this scene. That email lands in your inbox, you know the one, subject line. Annual performance review cycle is open. And you immediately think, oh, great, it's annual appraisal time, yay.
Said absolutely nobody, ever.
Exactly. It's this moment of, like, universal corporate dread, isn't it?
It really is. Doesn't matter if you're the manager looking at this huge pile of forms to fill out or, the employee trying to remember what on earth you did back in January.
Right. It just feels like this massive administrative burden that gets in the way of doing actual work.
Totally. So why is it like this? Why is this process that's supposed to be about performance so well hated?
That's exactly what we're diving deep into today. We're looking at 3 really insightful articles by Szilvia Olah. And these don't just complain about it, they fundamentally challenge the whole idea of performance management as we know it. But look, before we properly jump in, just a quick thing. If you find this stuff interesting, if you want to dive deeper into HR strategy, people management, all that, please do subscribe and follow The Contrarian HR. We're on Substack, YouTube, and right here on Spotify.
Okay, so the mission for today. We're pulling out the core insights from these articles, and they start with something pretty bold, a real foundational truth.
What's that?
It's this. If you haven't actually managed your employees' performance consistently throughout the entire year, then you frankly don't have the right to measure it, to conduct that formal appraisal at the end.
Wow, okay. That definitely reframes things immediately. So the argument isn't really about the appraisal form itself.
Not fundamentally, no. The sources argue the real problem is often the managers. How they approach it, or maybe don't approach it properly, they end up turning what could be a useful tool into, and this is a quote, an absolute mockery.
A mockery. Strong words. So our goal today is to figure out why this annual thing feels so obsolete and, I guess more importantly, how we might actually fix it and make it useful again.
Exactly. And the articles are very clear on where the problem starts. It's often just manager dread. They hate doing reviews.
You can see why sometimes. The paperwork.
Right. They put it off, scramble at the last minute, and the result, well, the sources call it shockingly mediocre. Almost always.
Shockingly mediocre. And that mediocrity, it really shows up in the feedback itself, doesn't it? These documents, they should be strategic, specific.
But they end up, and again I'm quoting here, saying absolutely nothing of any real substance.
We've all seen those examples, haven't we? The articles list some classics like, he is a hard worker, always on time.
Oh, yeah? Or the equally unhelpful goes beyond her responsibilities and helps others.
Great. But how? What did they actually do?
Precisely. Or, my personal non-favorite. Time management skill is lacking, training is needed.
Okay. So vague. None of that tells you how someone actually contributed, to the business goals. What were their specific challenges? What should they maybe stop doing? It's just filler.
It's just filler, subjective filler.
Yeah.
And this lack of quality, this mediocrity, it actually costs a fortune. We really need to talk about the financial side of this.
Right, the cost. Because the argument is that companies are spending millions, maybe billions collectively every year on this.
With basically no outcome, because if the feedback is useless, people just ignore it. The process becomes this huge, expensive tick box exercise.
Let's try and grasp the scale of that waste. It's easy to think, oh, it's just a few hours.
Yeah.
But multiply that.
Well, the sources gave a kind of back-of-the-envelope calculation just to illustrate. Imagine a big company, say 300,000 employees.
Okay.
And let's be conservative. Maybe 1 hour for the employee prepping, 1 hour for the manager writing it, 1 hour for the actual chat. That's 3 hours per person.
Right.
Multiply that by 300,000 people times whatever the average loaded hourly cost is. You're talking millions of dollars just gone. Wasted on a process that doesn't improve performance, doesn't help the bottom line. It's essentially burning cash.
When you put it like that.
Yeah.
It's not just annoying, it's a massive financial drain.
Yeah.
Justified by, well, mediocrity.
Exactly. Which brings us to a really crucial point the sources make, and it's a bit controversial.
Go on.
They argue that HR itself, maybe unintentionally through its own training and policies, has actually helped make the annual appraisal redundant.
How so? That sounds like a contradiction.
It is. It's full of contradictions when you look closely. HR sets up these rules, often good rules, but then keeps a system going that kind of violates the spirit of those rules.
Okay, let's try and unpack those conflicts.
Yeah.
The articles must highlight some specific ones. Where do we start?
Let's start with the big one, the no surprises rule.
Ah, yes, the golden rule of appraisals. Everyone gets told this. Your appraisal feedback should never be a surprise.
Exactly. So think about the logic. If there are genuinely no surprises because you, the manager, have been giving timely, continuous feedback all year, then why do you need the big, formal annual review? It's just repeating stuff.
Okay, good point.
But if the feedback is a surprise, then the problem isn't the appraisal form, is it? The problem is the manager failed. They didn't do the continuous feedback part throughout the year.
So the appraisal becomes a crutch,
Yeah.
a way to dump a year's worth of feedback, or lack thereof, in one go.
Pretty much. It's only really needed to cover up the fact that proper performance management didn't happen.
Okay, that's one major contradiction. What else? There's the bias issue, right? That always comes up.
Oh, absolutely. The sources are blunt here. As humans, we are, and I quote, horribly unreliable raters of others.
We think we're objective, but we're really not.
Not even close. This is where the data gets really interesting. They talk about the idiosyncratic rater effect.
Okay, sounds technical. What does that mean in simple terms?
It basically means when I rate you, a huge chunk of that rating isn't actually about you and your performance. It's about me, my biases, my priorities, what I think good looks like, my personal definition of the rating scale.
Right, so my rating reflects my manager's worldview as much as my work.
More, potentially. The data point they use is staggering, 61%. 61% of what's in a typical performance rating is about the rater, the manager, not the employee.
Wow, 61%. That fundamentally undermines the whole idea of it being an objective measurement, doesn't it?
Completely. If nearly 2/3 of the score is noise from the rater, how can you rely on it for important decisions? It proves the process is, as the sources say, flawed, subjective, and therefore redundant as a pure measurement tool.
So if it's that flawed, are they saying just scrap it entirely?
Not necessarily scrap the conversation, but scrap the reliance on it as this objective, definitive measure. And they also point out that using it for things like bonuses or finding high potential people, well, that's often redundant too.
Why redundant? Isn't that a primary purpose?
Because you usually already have that data elsewhere, or you should. Actual business impact, that's in your KPIs, your project outcomes, maybe P&L data for some roles, employee potential and satisfaction. You get signals from engagement surveys, 360 feedback maybe, project success rates.
So forcing managers to try and capture all that again in this one subjective appraisal form is just duplicating effort.
Exactly. It's unnecessary data duplication. You're taking objective data that exists elsewhere and filtering it through that flawed, subjective 61% about the manager lens. Why do that? It just makes the annual process feel even more like bureaucratic overhead.
So let's say a manager's actually doing a decent job with like quarterly check-ins or regular one-on-ones.
Which they absolutely should be.
Right. Then filling out that big annual form at the end just feels like ticking HR's boxes. It's just repeating what's already been discussed.
Precisely. The sources argue that for a good manager, the annual form itself adds almost zero value to the actual performance conversation they've been having all year long. It's just documentation for documentation's sake.
Okay. So the picture painted so far is pretty bleak. Costly, biased, often redundant, generally miserable.
Yeah, not great.
So we have to pivot. What do the articles suggest as solutions? How do we rescue the appraisal, or at least the conversation, and make it genuinely useful? The idea seems to be shifting it towards a useful summary chat.
That's the core idea. Less of a formal high-stakes judgment, more of a structured summary and planning conversation. But crucially, this only works if certain foundations are already in place. Prerequisites, if you will.
Okay, what are these prerequisites?
The first one is fundamental, almost obvious, but often overlooked. Respect and trust.
Between the manager and the employee.
Yes. If that basic relationship foundation isn't there, the sources basically say don't even bother with the appraisal conversation. It'll just break down into defensiveness, ego battles,
Ego versus ego. Yeah, makes sense. What's next?
Competence. And this ties back to the quality issue we discussed. The manager, the appraiser, needs to be seen as professionally competent and credible by the employee.
Otherwise, the feedback just won't land.
Exactly. Why would you take development advice from someone you don't respect professionally? The sources even mention an example where an employee refused to sign their appraisal multiple times. Why? Because they had, and I quote, zero respect professionally for the appraiser's ability to judge their work.
Ouch.
Yeah.
That's a relationship breakdown right there.
It is. And when managers lack that competence, or maybe the confidence to have tough conversations continuously, they avoid conflict. They let things slide. And that, according to the source, is how you end up in the corporate kindergarten.
The corporate kindergarten. Explain that one.
It's where performance management is so broken, managers aren't really leading or developing people. They're just managing personalities, handling minor squabbles, basically acting like daycare providers instead of professional leaders driving performance, they avoid the real issues.
Right, focused on superficial stuff instead of substance, because the difficult conversations aren't happening. Okay, so we need trust, respect, competence. What else?
We circle back to the golden rule, the absolute non-negotiable. There mustn't be anything new in the appraisal.
No surprises. It has to be a summary.
It has to be. That formal chat is only valuable if it summarizes, reinforces, maybe documents what's already been discussed and managed throughout the year. It's the capstone, not the whole building.
Okay, so if we have that foundation, trust, competence, continuous dialogue, how does the actual summary chat need to change to be valuable? How do we avoid the vague pitfalls?
The key shift is from opinion to evidence. Hard evidence. The conversation needs to stick to things that are measurable or provable.
Get rid of the wishy-washy stuff.
Exactly. No more, you're a great team player. Instead, it has to be specific achievements. You did Project A, delivering it on time and under budget, which saved $6. Or you successfully resolved the conflict in Team B, leading to improved collaboration on Project C.
Concrete examples, and linking those examples back to the job role or maybe a competency framework.
Absolutely critical. You can't just list wins. You have to connect them. This specific action, managing that operational issue during the Q3 crisis, demonstrates strong problem-solving competency and reduced customer complaints by X% and saved the company dollars.
So it's specific, evidence-based, and linked to what the business actually values.
That's the goal. Treat it like a summary of the year's evidence, drawing on all those continuous conversations. It's not a standalone event pulled out of thin air once a year.
It reframes it completely, doesn't it? From Judgment Day to a structured progress review.
It should. And there's one more crucial element for the manager in that summary chat. It's about their own accountability.
What's that?
The manager must ask for feedback on themselves from the employee they're appraising. How did they do in supporting the employee? What could they have done better?
Ah, the two-way street.
Absolutely. The sources put it very directly. If a manager can dish it out but not take it, they fundamentally shouldn't be managing people, period, or conducting appraisals. It shows a lack of maturity needed for leadership.
That really tests the manager's commitment to genuine development, not just evaluation. Okay, so let's pull this all together then. The real problem isn't the appraisal form or even the meeting itself.
No, the true failure is relying on that single, often subjective end-of-year event while neglecting the real work. The continuous, evidence-based performance conversations that should be happening all year round.
The appraisal only really works, only has power, when it's just a formal summary of those high-quality ongoing dialogues.
Exactly. It formalizes the year's progress and sets the stage for the next. It's how you avoid that corporate kindergarten scenario and actually build a high-performing team. Specificity, evidence, continuous dialogue, and mutual accountability.
So thinking about our listeners, if the goal really is to stop wasting millions, stop the dread, and actually build what the sources call an awesome employee experience hub, maybe there's a final fodder challenge for them.
I think there is. Reflect on the last performance discussion you had, whether you were giving or receiving feedback. Find one piece of that generic wishy-washy feedback, something like needs to be more strategic or is a great asset.
Okay.
And then ask yourself, what specific measurable evidence, financial impact, operational improvement, project outcome could have replaced that vague statement? How could you make it concrete next time?
That's your actionable takeaway. Replace one vague comment with hard evidence. That small change, scaled up, could start to transform the whole process.
It's a starting point to move away from the dread and towards actual value.